a brilliant historian, a brilliant artist as well, and she's had an opportunity to design this exhibit working with Marty Gervais, and I guess a little bit of Craig as well, but this is her show, her display, and furthermore, I'll let you go.
Thank you, Maddie. Welcome everyone, thank you so much for being here. And I want to say thank you again, Museum Volunteer Group, for this really warm and generous, genuine offer and invite to speak to you today. I'm very happy. This is my first time speaking, so I'll try my best. Again, I will introduce myself as well. Maddie gave you a brief intro. So once again, my name is Nicole, and I am born and raised in Windsor, although I was a Met baby. I learned a bit of history of my family connection to Grace doing this project. My great-grandfather Edgar and his son, my grandfather Bruce, were physicians in Amherstburg and also physicians at Grace. And actually Edgar, my great-grandfather, his second wife, Anne McDonald, was actually a Grace grad, and I believe it's 1927. So yeah, kind of learned a bit about that during this process. So once again, yes, so I am a graduate of the University of Windsor, 3 times, undergrad in my Bachelor of Fine Arts, and then I did a Master's in History with Maddie, as he said, and then went back for my MBA. In between my Master's in History and my MBA, I went and did a certificate in Museum Management and Curatorship at Fleming College in Peterborough. So how did I get connected to this? It was actually through my MBA. For a lack of a better term, it was an internship at Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare on Prince Road. This was back, so I graduated in 2018, so end of 2017, beginning of 2018, I was at Hotel Dieu Grace and working in the communications department. Barely, maybe like 2, 3, maybe a week in the project that I was initially asked to kind of work on as they were initiating their new brand, was kind of evaluating their communication style, how, is there gaps and barriers between communicating with frontline staff, et cetera, when it became known to senior leadership that I had this museum background, and they're like, well, great. we had this room in the basement we don't know what to do with. It's full of stuff. So it turned out that the Catholic Health International, the CHI, which sponsors Hotel Dieu hospitals in Ontario, Quebec, and the States, offered funding if Hotel Dieu hospitals wanted to share and celebrate their history on Hotel Dieu. So my project was to kind of put a proposal to saying we want to share this shared history of Hotel Dieu Grace, eventually Grace Hotel Dieu Hospital, showcasing a lot that's in their archives as well as the Grace. So currently right now and then I was hired on to finish that project after I graduated, and currently there is a permanent exhibit at the Tay4 campus at Hotel Dieu Grace on that shared history. That being said, nearing the end of that project, that's when I met the Grace Alumni Nursing Alumni Association and their fearless leaders, Ethel Donman and Donna Robinson. They had come to HDGH to request, very pointedly, politely, I'm going to paraphrase here, that they think it's time that a history book was made on Grace Hospital, because, and it was just about to come done February 1st, 2020, it would be the 100th anniversary. And seeing as there was a book on Hotel Dieu, it only seemed fitting. So Bill Mara, who was the VP of Public Affairs at the time, they agreed the hospital was going to sponsor doing this book. He's also now the CEO of HDGH. So they reached out to Marty. Marty agreed to write the book, as he did for Hotel Dieu. And they also offered me the opportunity to help support Marty in this, as I was already kind of, waist deep in the archives there and kind of having worked on some Grace history. So they would just be kind of his research assistant and support on that. And I was very happy to. It was kind of a new experience for me, so yay. So once again, that was a very new experience for myself to kind of dive deeper into the history of Grace, as this exhibit at the hospital was very high level, and now this was getting more in depth. So Marty and I, we did an agreement on how we were going to divide and conquer this and what our rules were to play. So I talk about the book, even though that's not what we're here for today, but it is the foundation of what you see here today, as this is just, once again, a high level of what we were able, what we gained and learned so much about Grace Hospital. If we were to fill this room with everything, people would probably go cross-eyed. So once again, when this book was published and we had the celebration of Grace back in early 2020, that's when Craig, the museum, approached Marty and myself and said, great, it's the 100th anniversary, let's have an exhibit. We're like, oh, all right. As we were just about to get started, Marty and I kind of said, well, how are you going to do this? Well, we know what happened in 2020 of March. So we're like, okay, we'll put this on the back burner for 2 weeks. As the story goes. So earlier in the year, when everything started to open up again, Craig reached out again to me and said, hey, we can finally do this. Are you guys on board? We're like, yes. Let's go in our own archives and dust off all our stuff. Let's just blow the dust off this, shall we? So our second time Marty and I met together, we came back to this space to reintroduce ourselves and sat down to divide and conquer. How were we going to approach, what was our goal in the beginning of all this? What did we want to achieve, and how are we going to achieve this? So Marty was leveraging my museum creative design background, and I was using him for his wording side of everything. So I said, Marty, design comes out of the words. So please, let's sit down, let's talk about, things that we found was interesting in the book that we that we think people would like, what we found, connected to the Windsor area, and we think that would help people kind of be enticed to want to learn more. So Marty went away. We kind of did a list of things that we wanted to kind of talk about, and as he was starting to send me his writings, and I'm starting to think of what this exhibit's going to look like. What's the flow? I decided to do a little bit of a different approach than what's in the book, which kind of goes by decade. That's how we approach the book. Here I wanted to kind of give a bit of a taste of highlighting these moments, or themes, sorry, is what I'm trying to get at. So that was sort of how this room kind of flows, is these pockets of themes that are kind of derived from this book. So what I'm going to now introduce you now is kind of walking you through a bit of this exhibit, now that you have kind of our background of how it started and came out. So here is what I call my origin wall. Again, we wanted to give a taste to people who might either have a knowledge of the history of Windsor, have some knowledge, have absolutely no knowledge, and what they could gain from this. So we wanted a snapshot first of what was happening in Windsor at a specific moment, a specific time, which was basically Bedlam. We're talking about an end of the First World War, and we can very relate to this right now, as there was a flu going around. And the only hospital in Windsor at the time, Hotel Dieu, was overflowing. It was at capacity. There were patients in the hallways. They could not, and the citizens were begging for another hospital. It was not intended that there was going to be another general hospital in the city. When a young, very does not hear no for an answer gentleman came from Saskatchewan, hearing the pleas that there needs to be a hospital, when he arrived. For originally he came here to find a place for Salvation Army to build another maternity hospital. Salvation Armies at this point in time only built hospitals for women to give birth. At this point, when this young Salvation Army officer Fred Martin arrived in Windsor and saw the plea for another hospital, he knew what needed to be done. So his mission was to find a location for this hospital, and that's when he met a very stubborn and does not like to hear anything other than you listen to my no, Henry Ellis. I hope I said his name correctly, or that's embarrassing. So he owned the Ellis estate, and when Fred came up to him and said, we would love to want to buy your house, he basically said no. And whether or not it's a true story, it makes for a great story, is the fact that the very Ellis's dog Ripper came running up to the gate when Fred came to the door, and Fred bent down, whispered in the dog's ear, and the dog started waving his tail and said, yep, like this guy. And that's how the story goes of how Fred was able to obtain the property of the Ellis. So after that long-winded story for everyone, which I find kind of hilarious and fascinating, is again what kind of is part of this book and part of this exhibit is these stories that came out during the research. It's not just dates and buildings. It's these chit chats that were talked about and found and oral history that Marty was able to get out of alumni association, what makes it, and the nurses who worked on these floors. So again, this another thing is again, this Salvation Army Grace Hospital was the very first general hospital the Salvation ever built here in Windsor, or rather opened the doors, renovated inside. But clearly it was not enough for the population. I think it was about only 28 rooms at the time. So February 1st was the very time the hospital opened. And already they started the campaign that they needed to expand. So again, the whole idea of the origin snapshot was to kind of show you that this was a hospital that didn't want to say no and was going to keep going forward. We got to build, we got to keep going, because we have to help the city, we have to be what the city needs. So that was this wall. The next sort of theme, and the largest part of this too, again, as you can see from that front entrance, was really highlighting the students, this alumni, and who they were, because they're the ones that really made the school what it was. And so this part of the section of the story doesn't dive too deep into the day-to-day of the student life, but it gives you kind of a snapshot more of what made Grace as a student special. You have students on the ceiling of, the roof of their residence, doing goofy things that kids who's celebrating do, to show, you have a transcribed from the archives, one of the life of a student back in the early 20s, I want to say, of what a student life was like. What you had in your pocket was your purse. So again, some of these more real aspects. When we talk about caps of nursing, if to them it wasn't just an identifier down the hallway of, oh, there's a nurse. I know she's a nurse because she's wearing that cap. To them it was, I'm a graduate because I got that black band on it. You see me, I'm a graduate. I'm now part of a sisterhood. As my big sister put that cap on my head. This was moments that they've been waiting for, what they've strived to get, and were excited about. You see here in the center this evolution of what they wore. You have actually the blue is what they would have worn their first 2 years out of their 3. I always think it would be the pink. In this case, it's the blue. In the early style, you had these very starched bibs and aprons. So in this case, this is Miss McDonald, I believe that one as well. So that's Donald Robinson's, her bib. I don't think it's her gown underneath it, but it's her bib.
Miss D. McDonald.
Miss D. Donald and her now married name Robinson. So yeah, so these were hers, and she told me how stiff it was to move, and they would come around to make sure you're prim and proper. And as they, as time goes by, you got the evolution of the 60s and 70s as things start to shorten. The bib and apron are gone, and they're a bit more stylish, a bit more feminine, still with the distinction of color. And then back to then your graduate. There was also the long graduate style, and then your cape, which you would have worn during the cold times, and especially during their parade down from the hospital to the church. It was one of the funny things too about these bibs is what was called burning of the blues. So as they said, 2 years of wearing your blue, when you graduated to your pink, not administrative approved, the girls would get out of Windsor, Colchester, anywhere, have a bonfire, or somehow destroy their blues, because now they're on the next step, the next journey in their career. So again, these were these celebration moments for these young ladies, and part of their history, and it's in their yearbooks and everything, right? So. And as I mentioned, another big portion of their career was this, the graduate parade. That was another big symbol, another milestone that they couldn't wait to attend and be part of. There was the Salvation Army band in front of them, leading down the street. People on it was a parade. And then just kind of a brief history of the ending of the school and how it transferred to the college. Another part of this exhibit was kind of talking about some administrative, and before that too, it's as it still goes on today, Fairley Award for the nursing bursaries that are still given out to both university and college nurses students that were started by the alum at the Grace Hospital. A little bit about the visionaries, what was called sort of these 3 women, the 3 V's. You have Brett, Barr, and Barker. I highlight them, even though they're not just the only administration or figureheads of the hospital that were quite prominent and did so much great. These 3 ladies were kind of a force to be reckoned with. Especially Brett, who, when she came down to be superintendent of the hospital, was during a very difficult time. There was no money. Wars were going on. How do you keep a hospital afloat, students working during a very troubling time? So again, this is a small hospital that is trying to keep on its feet, and it's amazing the work that these 3 superintendents, at one point were directors, other nursing, continue to fight to keep Grace in the forefront and as an establishment. I have this one small little, the human elevator panel over here. I wanted to add him, mostly because it took me forever to find who the human elevator was. And again, I just wanted, it was to kind of tease out these small little, again, stories that were coming out of the research that would have been just more internally known to graduates, that no one really, not to say they didn't not know the name of the human elevator, but when in these echoes, which was the newsletter sent to Grace alum, they mentioned, oh yeah, human elevator did this today. It was just what they called him. So when I came across the name human elevator, I'm like, okay, who is this? And of course, you can't just kind of Google the human elevator. Kind of get some strange things come up. So it was part of my my little side project. I'm like, I'm gonna find who the hell human elevator was, and I came across a student paper. She mentions I reached. I'm like, where did you find student? Well, I just read it in this Echoes. So no name. Okay. But what we knew about him was that in the very beginning of Grace at the Ellis House, he carried pregnant women up and down the stairs.
Wow.
He was the orderly who did everything, as being the actual human elevator.
Was his back okay?
I finally did find it. I can't, it's probably my notes somewhere, where I finally found, and I think I threw myself a party, where I finally found James Dix, and I couldn't be more happy to read about him. And this little caption here is actually him and his wife is in, I believe, in the middle. And it was their retirement from Grace. Now both of them had been there for years. She was actually, I believe, a night director, a night nurse for the hospital, but don't quote me on that right now. So, and then reading that little article and again hearing his very first time at the hospital, carrying these women up and down the stairs as part of, not even part of his duties, that's what you just did. So I found these little stories to be very exciting and a really personal touch, because you don't think about the fact that you open a hospital in a house that has no elevator.
And then with you having to try to trace out, I can imagine a sleepless nights, but who is this guy? I really want to know.
It's like I'm becoming very friendly very quickly.
Yeah. Anytime you look anything up, yep.
And speaking of children, and once again, Grace Hospital was originally supposed to be a maternity hospital, so we cannot not talk about the children of Grace. This little corner here, this theme that comes out in the books again, is I never known an institution that would invite children who were born at Grace to come for a tea party. And actually in this picture too is actually the very first baby born at Grace. So when Grace opened in February 1st, 2020, I'm gonna say maybe a couple days, a week later, a frantic couple arrive at the hospital doors. They haven't even really got the starch out of the new bed, beds haven't even slept in. She's expectant. She's getting hauled up the stairs by the elevator man. So they had just read a new hospital had opened, and they stopped in, and they actually named her Grace after the hospital. So she actually arrived to the very first, she also came, so they invited all the babies. I think she was about 18 when she came to this, with all the way to an infant for the tea party. Also, I think this is the best picture in the world of the great doctors who, and still working, who saw the need for, women who, why they are traveling to London when they're in such delicate state. They need the INCUBE, they need that neonatal right away. So opening that here in Grace, taking care of, so, the best picture, I think there was 75 babies in there out of the 100 or so that they were able to help survive in those years. I think it's a great picture. So, as well as Faith Haven, Grace Hospital, the alumni, I believe it was Brett, saw the need for a place for the unwed mothers who were coming to the doorsteps and feeling scared and vulnerable. So they bought a house down the street, and the nurses took care of these ladies. So how the children have a safe place to grow, either the children went to foster homes or eventually, the families came to see the daughters and they did go. It's stories we don't know all about, but there was still a place for these women that was safe. They could have their children and be with themselves in a home and protected. So that went on for quite a bit. It was open for quite a while, I think in the 70s, when it finally was closed.
I remember it being there.
Yeah?
I remember.
Yeah, because it would have been
In the
very,
late 70s, I was.
Yeah. So.
I don't know if it's still operating, but I remember
But it was
someone saying, that's the building.
That's the building. Yeah, it might have been in the transition at the same time. There was even stories too that in the book of having, and we couldn't find it, but we had read about it in the echoes of there kept coming thieves to steal the eggs from the chickens. And then of course we can't really talk about a building without talking about a bit of the expansion. So here we have, from the original building of Grace, the very first expansion that goes back to the campaign, the north wing, and then eventually just the center stage, and talking about the fire. So what happened to that original building? Now they built around it. But back in the 60s, there was a fire on June 5th on the floors. And again, that's where the babies still were. Donna Robinson, again, she was there that day. Everyone survived, and she said she remembers, everyone running, getting everyone down the stairs and out to safety. So, I just
The elevator guy was still around that time.
maybe. Actually, would be, that would be 60s. I think he was late 60s, so he might have still been around.
The elevator.
Yeah, get the elevator, man. And then, of course, sort of, where is Grace today? So, and again, something that's very, once again, relatable, what's happening now, especially that's something in the forefront of Windsor Essex County's minds is, healthcare, facilities, money. So at a time, you had 4 major hospitals in the city. And government was cutting back and saying, you have to kind of figure this out or you're closing. It was thankful that Hotel Dieu and Grace, sat down at a table and said, we have some shared values. How, let's make a deal here. So in the early 1990s, 1992 they started, 93 is when they signed those papers to become Hotel Dieu Grace Hospital. And as we know, the property now is nothing but a field. Eventually during that alliance between Windsor Regional and Hotel Dieu Grace, so Hotel Dieu Grace now on Prince Road, Windsor Regional taking the downtown campus, Nauseolette, and Grace Hospital building, which was sitting up for rot for quite a while, was finally demolished in those days. So a bittersweet ending to an incredible story, but it's thankfully, with this alliance, Grace is still around. And at the end of the day, this is what Marty and myself, this was the goal from the very beginning with this book, was to take what Ethel, Donna, and previous alumni presidents' vision and mandate to collect as much as they possibly could of the history and to give it, a front, a middle, and an end. As best we could, and it's never complete history, let's be honest. And so why this was important to us and why we wanted to give sort of an overhead snapshot was to make people be aware of what was here, intrigued to learn more, and hopefully maybe they can start asking questions of their families, because that's where Ethel and Don were able to find these stories, find their alumni, is by families talking to each other. And it turns out your great aunt was, and well, let's see what's in her basement. And it comes up these photo albums, scrapbooks, personal letters that come from it. So, and that's exactly what this was all about. I mean, we have in that case letters from Grace alum that came all the way from overseas because they sent letters to the Grace Hospital. It was not just they graduated and forgot about it. This was still their family, still their community, still is today. So that's sort of the snapshot we wanted to kind of give. It wasn't just here's a date, here's a building, but that there's a bit more to the story, and we hope people kind of want to be intrigued and learn more about that.
Thank you. Wow. What a big tale. What a cool tale. You pass.
My son was born in Grace Hospital. When he was 5 years old, we had to put him into the hospital for his tonsils. He had to have his tonsils removed. And that was the week Santa Claus was coming to 5th floor. And he followed Santa Claus all over that whole floor. And finally Santa said, let's go back to your room, Gran. And so back they went. And he said, you can sit right here on my bed, right beside me. And there's in Windsor Star, did an article, I have a picture of him with Santa Claus.
Santa Claus.
Wonderful.
That's great.
Yeah.
Your boy and Santa on his bed.
Were there not residents for the nurses attached to the old
Yeah, so
Grace?
a little bit down the street, it was the residence, it's called a tin can, but it was actually the administration lived there, and they called it a tin can with the roof. Every time it rained, it just sounded like you were in a tin can.
Right.
But yes, at the original hospital, the nurses did live on site. Obviously, it's not enough space. They bought houses throughout on Crawford, down the street, because again, it was on Crawford in London. So they bought multiple homes down the street. Eventually building the residence that you see that was there, yeah.
So 1995, there. That's the year that my wife was transferred from Grace to the Duke.
Oh, okay.
Because she had been hired there in 1981 by Dr. Jack Prince.
Okay. I've heard it, yes.
He was the head of nuclear medicine, and she, for her second year, she had to do a year of intern there. And 2 years later, he left her, and she became a senior tech.
Oh.
She was good enough.
Very cool. Good for her.
But I mean, so I see 95
Yeah.
there. That's the year they moved her from there to there
Oh, wow.
in nuclear medicine.
Wow. That must have been an adjustment.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. It's like going from heaven to the other
Yeah,
place.
there's been a lot of conversations I
I'm
heard
sure you've
about
heard
that.
comments like that because they found it an interesting transition.
Yes, yeah. But eventually that spirit kind of came up
Well,
a little bit.
We're a little bit, yes. Anyway.
Nicole, on
Yes.
behalf of the Windsor Museum Group, I'd like
Oh,
to thank you
well,
very
thank
much
you.
for such a great exhibit.
This
and,
was
and a great book. It is all displayed in our book, in our gift shop. If anybody's interested, soft cover and hardcover, both available in the gift shop.
Thanks. I bought the soft cover on the day of the first day you had with that guy named Gervais.
Oh, good.
that guy.
Good. Yeah.
I'll tell you stories about him in a minute. Separate issue though.
All right.
Oh, I was going to say, I brought something. I have a booklet that was given to all the maternity moms.
really?
Like I was born in Grace, and so it's mine actually about me.
You were born there, you said?
Yeah, it's in my case. I could show it to you.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I was too, Malcolm, and both of my kids and my husband.
See, this is why I had a preface. I was not born in Grace, but
I
as soon
think
as you
it was
mentioned
born-
Grace
My
Hospital,
son
that's all that
was
comes.
born in his wife the last week just before they were
Before they
talking
gave-
about other kids, before it was torn out.
Wow.
Yeah, so a lot of memories there. And then I worked on a knee replacement.
Okay.
Everybody's got a memory. Pediatric.
Yes, okay, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're,
history.
you are history.
You've got history there.
I'm told that urgent care may return. Like there's a residential project happening on the site, but an urgent care may be part of it.
No, they've
too?
actually now agreed, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, that they're building international student
Housing.
buildings on
With
there.
shops
Yeah.
in the wall.
Oh.
Something like, something.
I don't know whether there's a walking.
Yeah, because before COVID hit, Hotel du Grace did put a bid in to do that. It was going to be, they wanted that spot back. They lost the bid. There was a few bids going in for that property, so.
There's a one guy that wanted to be an amusement park for a while, I think.
Well,
10 years ago, the one guy wanted to develop it into an amusement park.
and there's another one, a Greek church, I think, for a while as well too, a Greek community church.
So this Gervais character, when he was teaching at the school over there, he was teaching English and journalism.
Yeah.
And my little girl, my favorite,
Yeah, I like the chairman. I accidentally turned it too much.
you know, he used to take his senior students to